Ken Jones is here in the place of Secretary Curley. And we have Joe Segali and Jeff Wilcox and, of course, Catherine Dimitrick. So I think that's a quorum. I think the only one we're missing is Chad. So we also have a number of folks that have been invited to provide staff support to the subcommittee. And so I will, of course, we have been introduced to Sue Charbonneau, who will be providing administrative support, at least in the short term. And we have Ben Rose, who's the recovery mitigation chief at Vermont Emergency Management, Stephanie Smith, who is the state hazard mitigation officer at Vermont Emergency Management, and Marion Walls, who is an emergency management planner at VEM. And I see we have Judith Guest. Are you a member of the public, or are you with another agency or organization?
Well, I'm certainly a member of the public. I live in Irisburg, where for my sins, I'm the clerk of the Planning Commission, and I'm also on the board of Energize Vermont, and I have a strong interest in rural resilience.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us. So, Catherine, I think we can probably call the meeting to order now.
I think so. Yes.
Okay. So let's do a quick review of the agenda with the subcommittee and ask if there are any adjustments that need to be made. So we've got primarily our meeting today will be focused on additional subcommittee members and making decisions on who should be added, as well as identifying necessary subcommittee member roles and responsibilities. So that'll take up the majority of our meeting, and we'll have some time at the end for public comment. Any adjustments needed to the agenda? Alrighty.
And thanks, Erica, for taking the leads. I'm playing a little catch up because my computer crashed right before the meeting started. So I spent all my prep time instead trying to get my computer working again.
I'm here for you.
Thanks.
Very resilient of you.
Oh, very funny, Joe.
Okay, so why don't we hop right into the first item on the agenda, which is discussion of additional subcommittee members. We all received an email from Jane last night with the final results of the subcommittee member rankings. And I'm going to share my screen so that we can all see the rural resilience tab on that. I think I'll probably just make it easier for all of us to see it all together. So just a second.
And Erica, I'll note that for the rest of the subcommittee members, that I was contacted by a legislator yesterday who had a person that she thought had been nominated through a process that she was forwarded and did not end up on our list. So Erica, I can forward you the summary of that person in case we want to consider her, since none of us got to see her before.
Okay.
I'm trying to, but my computer's not letting me, but I'll keep trying.
And I'll note that on this list of nominees, I had input some nominees from VEM, but we are incorporating them as staff support, so they're just not scored. But so that's why they didn't. So VEM folks, don't take offense.
Yeah, I skipped over the state staff when they were on the list. I don't think I ranked them, not because they aren't highly desirable.
So do we want to do a quick review of, before we go through the list, do we want to do a quick review of what we're primarily looking for? We started this discussion last week, you know, to kind of preface our scoring of or our ranking of the nominees. And we were looking, especially because at the council meeting on Monday, we got some pretty unanimous or at least strong indications that folks would like to see us incorporate the human part of resilience, the community resilience piece of into our deliberations. So we're really not talking just about the built environment and in the intersection of natural systems, but we're also, when we're contemplating recommendations for rural resilience, we are to be looking at different factors that impact individual resilience, and those could be factors such as financial, the strength in financial. There's Chad. I'll admit him. The strength of that municipality's economy. Maybe certain organizations that provide a network of support. So those are types of things that we will use and incorporate into our charge. So the other thing that we wanted to look at is we wanted to make sure that we had somebody that could represent municipal government and could also represent and have some background in the economy and financial matters, as well as somebody that could provide more expertise in terms of natural systems, since that's a central part of it. Do any of the committee members do we need to have a quick discussion on what we should really be focusing in on, given our subcommittees makeup and the charge that we have for us?
Erica, this is Chad here. Sorry for being late. I put in the chat, I was having some issues with access to Teams. I presume you're talking about the slate that you've shared on the screen here?
Yeah, so we were just kind of going over our discussion from the last meeting on what we're really looking for.
Yeah.
Before we started going through the list.
Yeah.
I was just want to note one other thing that I heard at the council meeting, and that was, well, we are the Rural Resilience Committee. They also said we're not just limited to rural areas. I'm not sure that changes anything on this list. I mean, like if with Karen Horn, she kind of covers all municipalities. But I mean, maybe it's more of a it's more about emphasis. Or make sure we're considering rural areas, but don't forget the urban areas. And just so it's sort of rural. It's resilience about everything. It sounds like to me.
Right.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Joe. Yep.
Okay, so why don't we start going through our list? We've got folks that have been ranked unanimously as high, and the folks that have been ranked as high by one or more. And we really only have, so we have the Catherine, Jeff, Ken, Chad, and Joe. So we have 6 of us that are on the committee thus far, and we're trying to shoot for 8 to 10, or maybe 8 to 12. Am I right there, Catherine?
I think that's right. I think we're looking for maybe 5 to 6 additional members.
Yeah.
Did we get any guidance about some of the folks that are high ranked, but also were being considered for other committees?
We didn't. I think we would have to, maybe we could approach this with, our top 5 or 6, and then the folks.
And then next down.
Yeah, because some of these folks have not been reached out to yet. have the time to devote to this. So, and we want to be sure, when we're doing our outreach and follow up to this, that they've got, we can confirm that they've got the time.
I think that makes sense. But how does that feel to the other committee members?
Makes sense.
Okay. I will just say at the outset, before we start trying to figure out how to whittle this down, that I was overwhelmed by the large number of highly qualified, really amazing people that wanted to serve. And it was really hard to figure out who to rank high among that list, because there were so many wonderful people. And I did appreciate the guidance that Jane gave us of a couple of parameters. And if they met, however many, then that's how you rank high. And it's not a reflection of the quality of the individuals if they didn't rank high, but rather what we're looking for in terms of filling out the committee.
Okay, so why don't we so we have Donald Campbell from the Vermont Land Trust, who actually indicated 2 different committees that he was interested in, or that he could. And so I don't know if he is if he has. Let's just double check to make sure that he's see if he was ranked on one of the other subcommittees on the agriculture one. Just gonna do a quick check. Doesn't look like it.
Right, he wasn't in the high for that committee.
Right.
Okay.
And according to this, I'm not sure if anybody knows Donald. And I don't know him, but we all rank him as high. And really, because there's I think he meets several of the criteria that we were looking at, as well as the expertise requirements that we would need. He's a land and easement steward. What do folks think?
Yeah, I like the forest connectivity, carbon farming, and food hub ventures. A lot of what we've been charged with here, I think.
And there's good, it adds to our geographic balance, certainly, from being from Bennington.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we need somebody with a land conservation perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, his work at the Land Trust is pretty. I don't know him, but I know a number of folks that work at the Land Trust, and yeah, they have they're all good.
Okay. And maybe we'll just go through the unanimous high and have some discussion on each of these, and then we can discuss how we want to tear it down.
That sounds good.
Okay. So Mindy Blank, Executive Director for Community Resilience Organizations. I have not worked with Mindy myself, maybe Ben and/or Stephanie or Marion has. But the community resilience organizations are definitely, especially when we're talking about the individual resilience cross section, they're definitely folks that I think we want to have incorporated into this committee.
Erica, yes, Crow, the organization, and Mindy as the incoming executive director did participate in some of the state hazard mitigation plan working group meetings leading up to the 2018 state hazard mitigation plan.
Okay. Any other discussion on that one? Oh, go ahead, Joe, sorry.
I'm just curious about Crow. I remember, Peg Elmer was really kind of instrumental early on, and so and it seemed like that was just getting off the ground. So they're now actually some kind of, funded organization around supporting efforts around the state.
Yes, I think they got a large foundation grant. and Mindy is the executive director, and they've worked with some specific communities around the state.
I mean, I think, you know, maybe Crow is sort of our connection to the individual level too, just as well as the community level. And also, you know, she's from Barre, which is, I think, one of the more economically challenged cities in the state. So maybe she'll bring that perspective too.
I liked her 21st century energy knowledge. You know, worked with the International Energy Agency. And was a presenter at COP21. That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
And nominated 4 times.
Yeah. So along those lines, do we know if she has been, where she sits with respect to other committees?
She was, let me check just transitions. So it doesn't look like she was scored unanimously high. She's not on the unanimously high list or on the high list.
Well, that seems like a good thing for us.
That's good for us, yeah. Let's grab her.
Yeah, okay. All right. Can we move on to Ann Lawless? The Heat Squad Neighbor Works of Western Vermont from Wheelock. And she is the outreach coordinator for the Heat Squad. And I am not familiar with that organization. Others familiar with that?
Yeah, Ken, I am pretty familiar with it. They do a lot of the weatherization support for low-income households.
That's great.
Yeah, this is Jeff. I work in weatherization, so they kind of when you say weatherization, they support more for low-income weatherization, like the other things that prohibit weatherization, like home repairs. And I think their energy efficiency work is more moderate income folks, but definitely they're working with low-income folks in some aspect, not necessarily the low-income weatherization.
This is Judith. I met Ann when she came to Irisburg and arranged for the weatherization of our public library. And I was very impressed with her work and her relations with the community.
This is Ben. I would echo that and put in a strong thumbs up for Ann. Previously, she was the executive director of the American Precision Museum in Springfield, which got clobbered in Tropical Storm Irene, and we went a few difficult rounds together with FEMA on that. Then she moved to the Kingdom. Her husband is a newspaper reporter up in Barton, I believe, and she's very involved in community planning and emergency planning in Wheelock. And I was recently talking to her about a consortium of communities that are working on local hazard mitigation planning. Wheelock, Sutton, that whole kind of donut around St. Johnsbury, which is a high needs area. And so I think she'd bring a really valuable perspective.
And also I see she was part of the Climate Catalyst program, so clearly has an interest in climate.
I have a question about energy efficiency and weatherization as it relates to resiliency. You know, is that really a mitigation kind of strategy? I mean, she may have other, you know, experiences like doing hazard mitigation plans, which I do see as definitely a resilience kind of activity. But it's an overarching question I have, because does anybody have any thoughts or reactions to that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's all tied together.
Yeah, it's both.
I know, but we have other committees, you know, like the cross-sector mitigation committee, and
Yeah, this is Ken. That's my main responsibility is that committee. I'm not a member, but I staff it, and there's no question that the overall weatherization topic will be addressed to understand its impacts. But I think there is a role for understanding what the role of improving the housing stock generally is for an overall resilience topic that goes beyond what we're going to deal with for really the straight carbon economic impacts of weatherization.
I also think when we look at our charge, and I'll have to bring it up again, but I remember it saying one of our deliverables has to do with recommendations for how communities can reduce their fossil fuel consumption at the municipal level. And so I think that is definitely going to have some overlap with the housing stock in some of the municipalities. But I think it's a good point, Joe, because we may need to, think about where we want to center those resources in terms of weatherization, and if we already have representation for that piece of things, on the committee, because we do.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's move to Karen Horn, who's the public policy director at the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And she, I hadn't worked with her a lot before COVID. We work quite a bit now, in COVID, and I can say she's definitely a fantastic representative for municipal government. And understands the breadth of challenges and how they work.
And she was on the State Hazard Mitigation Plan Committee as well.
What I see here in terms of our unanimously high ranking is that we don't have anybody else that it was ranked unanimously high. Or that would represent municipal government. So I'll just point that.
Right. I've worked, Chad here, I've worked with Karen as well over the years and found her to be really knowledgeable, a wealth of information about, all things municipal governance and operations. So, yeah, I agree. She would be a pretty strong asset to this group, I would think.
I agree.
And then as we move into, we have a couple of different utility representatives, Mike Burke and Rebecca Town. And because I think it's worth discussing them together. Mike, we have worked closely with for years at GMP, especially in the response realm. Mike has the distinct pleasure of waking me up in the middle of the night when they need to request additional crews when US crews are not available for storm restoration, and they need to expedite the crews of the crossing of Canadian crews. So that's always very, very fun. But he also is represented on the Governor's Emergency Preparedness Advisory Council and has spoken quite a bit about the impacts of climate change and the role of that the utilities have in terms of climate change adaptation and increasing the resilience of their systems. Hey, Ben.
So at the risk of starting a sidebar conversation or trying to frame the whole conversation about committee composition, I was thinking about this list and how many spots you have available. And I am concerned that there is not enough space in this subcommittee to really go after both electrical grid and housing. And I think you're going to be spread very thin if you try to have representation in both of those areas. And from where I sit in our day-to-day work, the utilities have access to a lot of federal hazard mitigation money, and we know how to access it. And we're moving forward with smart grid and with doing hazard mitigation associated with repairs from storm damages. And I feel like there's a lot of momentum in the utility world that we're not necessarily going to be able to magnify a lot with this subcommittee's work. Whereas I think that housing gets to the core of flood resilience and adaptation to changing weather. And if we're really going to go after rural resilience and adaptation, I think we have to get into the conversation with municipalities about where and how people live. And so I would go for the municipal's perspective and the housing expertise, the mobile home folks, the VHCB folks, as the subject matter expertise I think you want on this committee. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ben. I think we also need to keep in mind that our charge by statute is to focus on transportation, electricity, housing, emergency services, and communications infrastructure. So you're right. We are by default, as built, spread thin. And add in individual resilience, and it adds another layer.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
So that's a good point, Ben. I think what you may be highlighting are where we end up spending the majority of our time and discussion as it relates to recommendations, but here I think we need to make sure that our representatives are reflective of our charge. But that's for further discussion here. We've got.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mary. I'm way too talking about these meetings. So.
No, I thought you were done. I didn't know that. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I did hear from Ann Margolis, who couldn't make the meeting today, and she just wanted to put in a plug for Michael Burke, having worked with him on some resiliency work. So I told her I'd pass that along.
Erica, one more follow-up comment. If you do want to have utility representation and do it efficiently with one spot, I think Green Mountain Power and Mike Burke is the logical person, because Green Mountain Power covers so much more of the state, and because Green Mountain Power as a private utility does not have access to the federal mitigation dollars that the northern utilities do as municipals or nonprofits. So I think Mike Burke would be the logical utility voice.
Yeah, and if I could, Erica and Catherine, Ben, I think those are all really good points that you made. I would like to strongly advocate for utility participation on this committee, and sort of following along with what Erica was saying. We're going to need the utilities to really serve as the backbone for the energy transition here. And, as we move towards a more distributed generation profile that is going to improve resiliency and energy security. Really, it's the utilities that are key to making this transition. And they're going to be providing the fiber networks, the communications, as well as the electrical grid of the future. But I think with respect to thinking about how energy is going to be generated and utilized, especially with respect to local sources of that generation, utilities have a really, really important role here. We can't make this transition without them, quite frankly. So I strongly support it. And, I whether it's Rebecca, who I work with on a regular basis, I think she's great. She's really getting a crash course right now in all things broadband for that part of the state, as you all could imagine. is a critical need. She's great, but I think I do appreciate the points that are made with respect to the resources at Green Mountain Power. It'd be hard for me to say this, but I would imagine Michael may have a little bit more bandwidth than Rebecca, just based on her position as the CEO. Whereas Michael is definitely, further into the weeds on grid management and resilience.
Good discussion. Thank you. Why don't we move on to Tara Kulkarni, Dr. Kulkarni from Norwich University. Many of us know her and her work with the Global Resilience and Security Center at Norwich. She, I think, really brings she brings access to a lot of expertise that is available through their center and through the academic community. And so that may be something that we are missing here in terms of our representation thus far. And I'm sorry for the noise in the background. I'm always apologizing for the noise in the background on this homestead. We have snow banks being pushed back because there's feet and feet and feet of snow out there. It's just bad timing.
I mean, it would seem strange not to include what's the director of the Center for Global Resilience in a committee on resilience. And it seems like bringing that broader perspective could be really useful. I will say I agree with what Ben was saying too about the need to have housing represented, and so I would put, we may want to we'll probably have to go back up to the top of the list again and kind of see what's most important to us. But I think if we divided this list into like who top priority and lower priority, I might put her on a lower priority despite what I just said, because I think I would put somebody from housing as a higher priority.
Right, we've got a few folks that are nominated for on the weatherization front and individual resilience, but we don't have anybody that's unanimously ranked to talk about zoning regulations and housing placement and actually marching housing away from vulnerable areas.
But you've got me. I know zoning.
That's right. That's right. I had nominated Jen Holler from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. She does a lot of that at the strong suggestion of Stephanie Smith and Ben Rose. So that's one in that is definitely a resource that we may want to tap into. So why don't we go down through? So our conversation we have centered on we need utility representation, and from a communications infrastructure, I think we have Ann Margolis that is staffed for this committee. She couldn't be here today, but we can definitely tap into her expertise. We need somebody that can really represent on the individual resilience piece and community resilience piece, which can come from a lot of different angles. The natural systems and land management. So I think we've got, as well as municipal. So I think we've got some representatives here with Donald Campbell, Mindy Blank, Karen Horn, and Michael Burke that fulfill those roles. Yeah. what does the committee think about that in terms of maybe placing them on the high priority list? I'm gonna just start putting some colors on them, like green means go, yellow means next down, or something like that.
I think that makes sense. The only other person I want to throw out there that we haven't talked about yet, wasn't unanimously high, but was highly ranked, is Dave Snedeker. And I think that we should consider him for a few reasons. Northeast Kingdom, number one, he's the director of a regional development corporation, so he'll bring the economic, small business perspective, industrial perspective. And additionally, the Legislative Rural Caucus suggested him for this subcommittee. So I think it's important to recognize his broad support among the Legislative Rural Caucus as a voice that they would like to see on this committee.
And Dave is also chair of the Telecom Connectivity and Advisory.
That's right. He is. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's huge. Yeah, I've worked with Dave in the past too. I'd be supportive of him joining this subcommittee.
Okay, so let me find him.
Yeah,
I would also agree. And so sounds like we've got several folks that would agree with that, with putting him on the high priority list, even though he's not unanimously ranked. Again, this is a guide. This is not something that we're tied to. Let me just find his name here.
I think he was right below the unanimous ones.
Yeah, he was in the high rank group.
Okay. All right, good.
Yeah, I didn't rank him high only because I felt we have pretty good representation from the Regional Planning commissions with Catherine. I didn't, really wasn't thinking about him and the other roles that he plays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so that's 5. It's hard. Okay, I'm just writing down some notes here.
I thought, did we have Ann Lawless as a yes, Erica?
So the original names that I had thrown out there were Donald Campbell, Mindy Blank, Karen Horn, and Michael Burke. I don't know if somebody just took Mindy's. So let's look at that. So Donald Campbell is fulfills the role of land management and the intersection of natural systems. Mindy Blank from the community resilience perspective and individual resilience perspective, as well as support systems that impact community resilience in general.
Okay.
Is that something we should we rank her high priority?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I would agree with that.
Okay. Ann Lawless, we want to rank her high priority.
I think she brings a good perspective in terms of the individual community housing transition piece. I think it's an important perspective that she brings.
Okay. Karen Horn, that's from the municipal perspective.
Yes.
We don't have. Okay.
Yes, please.
And Michael Burke.
I would say so. Yeah.
So we talked about Rebecca Town. I would suggest that we place her on the secondary priority in case we don't have a utility representative in the first outreach. I think what I'm hearing is we definitely want to have a utility representative, regardless.
I think that makes sense. Michael is first and then Rebecca as the backup.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just making some notes here in terms of categories that we want to ensure that we have. And Tara Kulkarni, Dr. Kulkarni.
I just feel like if she wants to give us her expertise, that we absolutely should take it.
Yeah, I would agree.
I would agree too. I think the thing that I'm just knowing the space that we have on the committee, we may want to, if we don't feel we have enough space on the committee, we may want to ask her to participate in committee meetings, but not necessarily be a committee member. But that's, I would still rank her green, but we may not, we may decide that we don't have enough space. Go ahead, Ben.
Erica, from my perspective, I think you're on the right track because from my experience, Tara is inside academia. And I think that she would be a good person to invite for specific topics or specific meetings. But I think there's other times when the conversation is going to be in areas where she's not really going to be able to engage that much. So I would, if we had one more spot, I would not give it to Tara. I think I would give it to Jen Holler.
Yeah, I support that. I mean, I know Catherine knows a lot about land use planning and probably is an expert in land use planning. But I think when it comes to housing, it's more than just about zoning and land use planning. I don't know, it's other stuff. I'm not a housing expert, but I just, when I think of Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, I think it's, you know, it's broader than planning and regulations.
What do the other committee members think about that? Do we really feel strongly that we need to have a housing representative on the committee? I mean, it's in our charge, but I want to be, we didn't unanimously rank VHCB for representation.
I think Jen is great and VHCB is incredible. I think we have a housing person in Anne. Did I get the name right? Is it Anne?
Ann Lawless?
Yeah, is that the right person who does the Heat Squad? I mean, it's not the same housing perspective.
Right. I think
It's
there's the weatherization piece, and then there's really the housing placement and where we target in terms of areas for housing, and how that plays into the vulnerability of those. I'm having a hard time with words. How that plays into the vulnerability of those folks, and also the fact that we know that like the lower income population are more adversely affected by repetitive loss and flooding because of the areas that they're located in terms of proximity to waterways.
Right. So this conversation and you just saying that and knowing that and knowing we have Stephanie's support and Ben's support and my support.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know if with the limited slots we have, if we need Jen too, although I think she's wonderful and would be thrilled to have her on the committee.
Well, it may just be a matter, again, like this is about inventorying the subject matter expertise we already have on the committee and what we need to add in terms of a standing seat versus what we need to invite to provide some expertise. So what do folks think in terms of, Catherine made a very good point as it relates to housing. Maybe we ask Jen to participate in some meetings upcoming and have some discussions with us, but maybe not invite her to be a part of the committee on a standing basis.
Erica, is that with the assumption that we would be asking Ann Lawless to join the subcommittee, or is that separate?
I mean, that's definitely up for discussion. I think she also brings a perspective of the rural parts of the state too. So
for sure.
I like that a lot. I think that Jen would be interested and willing to participate and help us in that regard. I also see if for some reason Ian can't be part of the formal subcommittee, that
Yeah.
Jen would be the person I would want to ask next.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
I'm going to highlight Jen as yellow.
And this is painful. I want to be able to say, yes, Jen should be on the subcommittee.
Oh, they should all be on it.
Oh yeah, the same thing with Rebecca Town. Like,
Yeah.
but it's good to have good backups.
And I think we all are committed to engaging those folks. I mean, we've got, right, basically what we have is a list of folks that we can engage with, and that is really important too. Okay, so far we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 committee members that we have ranked as green. And
Is
2
that a
we
bad thing? Can we go with 7?
So let me just do a double check on our membership right now. So 2, we have Joe and Chad and Secretary Curley, Ken Jones, same seat. Jeff, are you, I'm trying to, I don't have the list in front of me. Are you listed on our list as staff support, or are you from DCF? Or are you, I can't remember if we have a member that was identified.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not totally clear on that myself, and I was just typing you an email. I feel my knowledge is in low-income weatherization. I'm the state director, and I think I belong either in the cross-sector mitigation. I think I'm just in the way in this group. I mean, I have low-income experience, but I don't think that's a main, that's not a main charge. So I'm happy, to talk about that and get out of the way. If there's a way I can get over to that other group, great. But if not, I don't really want to take up a spot where I can't, contribute.
Well, especially if we are incorporating Anne in her expertise. I think, Jeff, we don't want to be redundant, so we can talk about that a bit more. We can, I think we want to be sure to, because of the geographic representation, we want to be sure to incorporate her as well. But you're right, when we talk about it's more of a cross-sector mitigation piece too, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we have 6, if I count that correctly.
That's what I got too.
So knowing that we may not get some of the folks that we've ranked as green, and knowing that just confirm this for me, folks, we want a utility rep, we want a municipal rep, we want an individual community resilience rep, and so that's 3. And I think we
want land, natural systems rep,
yes.
land use, right?
Yeah.
And then housing kind of weatherization, right?
Right.
And then so did we say, where did we land on with respect to Dave Snedeker? I had 7. Eric, it sounds like you and Catherine had 6. Is Dave and his I thought we were saying it'd be helpful to have sort of the perspective from rural business, small business. He's got a lot of he's got experience across the spectrum.
I was saying 6 and 6 already on the committee.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 7 identified, 6 already on the committee.
Thank you. Gotcha.
So what do folks, I actually think I'm going to suggest putting Dr. Kulkarni as yellow because we definitely don't want to be, I think they want us to be in the 8 to 10 range. And so if we can get as close to that as possible, we can tap into her and her expertise. Um, but how do folks think about that?
I'm okay with that.
We've got we've got Donald Campbell from the Land and Natural Systems. We've got Mindy Blank from the Individual and Community Resilience. We've got Ann Lawless from Weatherization, Karen Horn from Municipal, Michael Burke for Utilities. And from the housing perspective, we are covering housing with multiple representation here, but we will, if we feel that we have a gap, we will look at, we could look at Jen Holler. I'm separating weatherization and housing because housing, I think there may be a better word to use for it, but we're really talking about placement and
land development, land use patterns.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just I'll try this one more time. I would put Ann, is it Lawless, in the yellow category?
Yeah.
If we were going to, you know, because we're still at like 12 people.
Right.
Right?
So I think the point that you're making here is, you know, how does weatherization factor into overall resilience?
Yeah.
At the municipal and individual level.
Right.
So I think that's a point we should discuss a little bit, knowing that we only have 9 minutes left.
Yeah, either you agree with that or you don't, I guess. You know, but that's why I would sort of just put her lower on the list.
I think why I like her as a high priority is because of her participation in the Climate Catalyst program and her connection to the community individual piece that I don't know that we necessarily have from our other members. But maybe that's a role that Mindy plays as well.
I think I agree with that, Catherine. Just look at Mindy again.
So this is Jeff. Maybe the one thing I can offer is kind of an explanation on how weatherization, at least low income weatherization, allows families to be more resilient in a manner of, you know, weatherization saves them money. It also improves the health of the household. It does a lot of things non-energy related that really, we connect them to other programs. It makes their household more resilient to living in our climate and our state, expensive state. How it affects carbon, you know, I can't say anything about that, but it does make a household a lot more resilient. This may be my last meeting, but I just wanted to say that for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say the question is always like resilient to what, right? So we're trying to be resilient to climate change. And so we have, and all those things are important to be resilient to, right? I mean, but they're not what I think what you just described, Jeff. I wouldn't describe those as specific threats of climate change. And we know, you know, extreme weather is an issue we have to deal with. And there's a few other things like, you know, heat, you know, just heat impacts on health and things like that. Well, maybe there's a weatherization connection there, but so that's kind of all. That's where I'm sort of coming from. It's like, what are the from climate change resilient to?
Yeah, I agree.
We need to think about as a group at some point. I think is what really are those threats.
So we have if we keep Ann on from a weatherization perspective, we have 1, 2. I think we still have 7, right, or 6?
6.
High ranking.
Should
So knowing that we probably won't get to subcommittee roles and responsibilities today. But our deliverable for Friday is to identify the additional subcommittee members. And so I think we probably need to move into some voting on our high-ranking individuals. What does the committee think about that?
Sure.
I just would put out there, are we comfortable nominating 6, or are we trying to get it down to 5? We don't know if all these people will say yes.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with 6. I do think, just looking back over Anne's experience vis-a-vis Mindy's, it seems like Mindy's more at the community level, whereas Anne does sort of directly face, it's like B to C, right? She's at the customer, the household, level or point of engagement, which I think is going to be an important perspective for this committee, and I certainly don't bring any of that knowledge, so I'd be supportive of going with 6, but open to.
Yeah, and what we're looking at here in terms of categories is utility, municipal, individual, community resilience, housing land use, which is already covered, but land and natural systems. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Weatherization, land, natural systems, individual, community resilience, municipal, and a utility rep. That's 5. We have 6 high ranked now because we have added on David Snedeker, because he's got some cross sector expertise, as well as a geographic representation. So I'll put it out there. I am in favor of the 5 that cover our categories that we've outlined as important to incorporate in terms of representation on this committee, and then not having a 6th that has some cross-sector expertise.
Second.
Okay. Should we, Catherine, should we do separate motions for each of the, or should we just do?
I think we could do a slate. Yeah, let's just do a slate.
How does the rest, I mean, we can, if anybody can make a motion for anything and we can discuss it, and that's probably the better way to do this, so. Do you?
I'll move that we recommend the 6 people, right? 6.
6.
As our proposed new committee members.
I will second Joe's motion.
Is that Chad?
Yes, it was Chad.
Yes, it was. Trying to navigate my kids.
Hello, vacation.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve and nominate the 6 that we have highlighted in green on the sheet. We have a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
I didn't vote because I'm not sure that I should. So, but
You can, yes, you should.
I know I can, but
right,
certainly I support all the discussion that took place, and yeah.
So we have supportive votes from Catherine, Chad, myself, and Joe, and supportive from Ken, but we may just need to I don't know if we need to document whether that's an abstain or support, so I'll have to figure that out.
Can I interrupt real quickly, Erica?
Go ahead.
Who was it that made the original motion? I didn't catch that.
It was Joe Segali.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
And Chad Farrell seconded it. Okay, so next, how do we want to do the outreach to these folks?
Well, you're off now, right?
I am.
Yes. All right. So and Jane is off. So I guess that falls on, I can go ahead and do the outreach and just verify that they're available. And then I just wanted to also note that outside of these highly ranked individuals, we have a long list of more citizen representative nominations that I'm super excited to be able to utilize in terms of seeking input and feedback, and hopefully that we'll be able to work that into our scope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think, and we, have this is like a resource list for us.
Mhm.
So it's great. Okay, so Catherine is going to do the outreach to these folks to see if they're available and would be willing to accept our requests that they be on the Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee. Is the committee okay with tabling committee roles and responsibilities for our next meeting?
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Yep.
Because we do need to incorporate some public comment time here. So why don't we talk about the next meeting, and then we'll do public comment. We don't have another full council meeting until mid-March, but we do have some deliverables for that meeting, and I would propose that we identify a once a week meeting time, and Catherine and I can discuss the agenda items for the next meeting. I think we need to start talking about roles and responsibilities and next steps in terms of a work plan.
Yeah.
So why don't we, if folks are okay with it, I will ask Sue to do like a doodle poll and see what we've got available for times next week, and as well as the following week to schedule subcommittee meetings. Is that okay with folks to do once a week meetings?
Yep, sounds good.
Mm-hmm. And then Sue, if I get yeses from these subcommittee members, we'll figure out how to incorporate them in that doodle poll.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion from the committee? Okay, let's move into our public comment.
And Eric, if you need to go, you can
No,
go. Oh,
I'm
okay.
good. Just around, so I'm good. Let's move into our public comment period. Do any of the members of the public have anything they'd like to say to the subcommittee? I think we lost our members of the public. So I think I don't think we have any.
Glad to see the four of you here.
Yeah. All righty. Okay, any last discussion items or things that we should be thinking about in terms of our agenda for our next meeting?
The only thing I'll throw out there is if people can start thinking about resources or background materials that they think everybody on the committee should pay attention to and get familiar with, you can send them my way and I'll start a list.
Awesome.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you, everybody, for the discussion today. This is really good, and I'm really excited for the folks that we'll be reaching out to have represented.
Yeah, no doubt. And thanks for your leadership, Erica and Catherine.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Enjoy your vacations.
Take care.
Thanks. Back to it. See ya.